Hey everyone, welcome back to Bagel TCG. Today we're going to be doing a deck tech for Fang, the Draconic of Blades. This is a deck I have been playing since the release of the Hunted. I've been wanting to make a video like this for a while. I keep saying in the public Discord and to people that I'll make it, but I keep changing the deck slightly. So I decided just to stick with this. I've been pretty happy with at least something very close to this deck. I might change cards here and there, but I think this is close enough to where I would play a Fang deck right now. I think Fang, even though if you saw my tier list from a few days ago, I put him in C tier. I think he can be quite good, especially if you just want to play a deck for your armories or like ProQuest or something like that. My armory yesterday I went 3-0, but it's just an armory. I don't think he's going to win the Calling or the Pro Tour, but I think he's a solid deck. I think with good play and good pairings, he could be high B tier, low A tier. He does something really, really fundamentally powerful, like incredibly powerful once he's online. So I think that is what's so good about him, and the only reason I'm even looking at him, because I don't usually play decks that I think are like hot garbage. I actually think this deck has something going for it. And I do think it's the strongest warrior deck you can play right now, and the strongest like pure value deck you can probably play right now if that's what you're interested in. If you just like good numbers, just good value, but that's not like super aggro numbers, and you like kind of grindy value warrior stuff, I think Fang is your best bet for the current meta. I think he's pretty fun, and you get to play Draconic cards, which is cool too. So quickly going over it, we're going to try to get to 3 fealty to make our daggers free. Once we're there, we're going to try to play pitchless, and we're trying to get to 3 fealty as quickly as possible. We're trying to play at least 1 Draconic React every turn on our weapons, and we're trying to attack with both weapons to refresh our Valiant Dynamo. Headpiece is in case they come in with the Arsenal Disruption, or if we just get stuck with an all-red hand too early before we are online. Once we're online, we are happy to get all-red hands. But before then, we need at least a blue or a yellow every turn for the daggers. Chess Piece is for early game with the blues. How it works is you pitch a blue, you attack with both daggers. If one of them hits, you get to use the extra resource that you'll have to make a vigor. Then next turn, you can play your turn off of any red pitch, because basically you'll have that one resource from the vigor still. And even if you draw an all red hand, you can pitch a red, and that red is basically a yellow, which lets you use both daggers, which is really good. Otherwise, if it wasn't for grains, I would just play 15 yellows, because yellows get better value on offense. But because of grains, it smooths out a lot of the early game. We can play really greedy with only 12 blues, because you technically only need to draw a blue half the hands, which is really helpful. And then after that, once you're online, you can just block with it for 3 value, which is also pretty amazing. Gloves, they block for 3, and they can kind of replace the value of grains once you're online. Once you're online, you're not really going to ever need to grains. You'll just be using Brave Forge Bracers if you have that extra resource, but honestly, it's just for the 3 block. Altogether, our equipment blocks for 8 just on these 3 pieces, and then Valiant Dynamo will block for like 10 throughout the game, something really absurd. Now we're trying to turbo fealty. We're playing 3 pledge fealty for that. This card is horrible on the surface. It is doing absolutely nothing except making a fealty, which is really bad for 1 card on the front. But it turns out that smooths out so much of the game for us. You'll usually play it on top of a dagger, of course, so then it's getting +1 and go again value, already pretty decent. It lets you go straight to your second chain link for daggers, which turns on all of your stuff like Affirm Loyalty. So a great early hand is just any blue, and then Pledge Fealty and Affirm Loyalty. Then you get 2 fealties right there, and get to swing with your daggers for 6 value, plus Valiant Dynamo. So it's only like 7 value from the hand, which is pretty horrible for 3 cards. But you get 2 fealties out of it, so later you'll be getting really good value. So it's a really bad card that is unfortunately necessary, because it is the quickest way to get fealties. In addition to that, fealties can do really strong stuff later with cards like Blade Flurry and Sigil of Solace. And basically what I mean by that is these cards are not Draconic on their surface, but if you can make them Draconic with extra fealties, once you're at like 4 or 5 fealties and you're past the 3 that you need to keep, then it's really good, because if you are pitchless, let's say you're at 3 fealties, you have the 4th fealty that's extra from Pledge Fealty. You can go Weapon, Fealty, Blade Flurry, weapon, and now we have attacked for 7 and refresh dynamo for a single card we did 8 value. This is a 0 for 8 once you have a fealty extra for it. 0 for 8. 8 damage off of one card basically, or 8 value, which is really 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 broken, and that's kind of what I'm talking about with the deck doing some broken things. Otherwise, we've got some ways to mark, Searing Gaze, Long Whisker. We're playing all the 0 cost reactions basically that are good. So Affirm Loyalty, Blistering Blade, Long Whisker Loyalty, Searing Gaze, Tooth of the Dragon. They're just 0 cost. They're Draconic reacts. They turn on the weapon. They're pretty good. For the Rakai is probably the second best way to make fealties in the deck, with Pledge Fealty being the best one. This makes you an unconditional fealty as well, but they have to be marked, so you have to work a little bit for it. This is really good into aggro because we have this defense reaction Smoke Out, which when it defends a red card marks them. They can't really stop you, so you just block with it. On a red card, you get to mark them, and then you attack them next turn with For the Drakai. You get a fealty, and also remember they stay marked, so if this hits, then you get a second fealty, which is what's really good. In combination with any marked card, this is kind of 2 fealties worth, so you just need to find a way to make one other fealty with something like Pledge Fealty, another mark, Affirm Loyalty, stuff like that, right? So it gets you like most of the way there just by itself, which is really strong. Yeah, that's kind of the most here. We just have some strong reacts. We have all these Draconic reacts. We have Oath of Loyalty to get us that first Draconic chain link that's necessary for stuff like Affirm Loyalty, Searing Gaze, Long Whisker Loyalty. Sigil of Solace, like I said, is kind of like Blade Flurry once we're online with the fealties. It's 1 less value, but it's on defense, which is probably even better because slowing the game down means we get more and more and more value. The longer the game goes, the more times we refresh Dynamo, the more times we get free dagger attacks. It's just good. And then we have this one of Drop of Dragon Blood. I was not on this card for a really long time. I'm still like sometimes sus on it, but it can be kind of nice since it replaces itself at least. If you like early game pitch a blue and then get to do this, it replaces itself and lets you go straight to second dagger to then play something like an Affirm Loyalty or Searing Gaze. So it's kind of taking the place of something like a Pledge Fealty or Tooth of the Dragon, which gets you to that second chain link. But while it's doing it, it just does it for free. It just replaces itself because it says draw a card. So, and it gives you the resource back if you're paying 1 for it, which you will be most of the time. So early game, it's not as good late game to be honest, but early game it's pretty amazing to get you second dagger pretty easily. So I think it's worth it just for that. Late game, I don't know, it's not as great. Maybe you use it on the second dagger sometimes just to get the +1, get a resource, draw a card or something, but mostly in the early game it's really great. You could probably cut Drop of Dragon Blood if you really hate it. Then we've got the 15 resource cards. Glint is like maybe the best blue because it can just give a weapon go again. This lets you get to second chain link. I keep talking about that, but it's because it's pretty important for all of our on hits, like getting the mark on Searing Gaze, getting the mark on Long Whisker Loyalty, getting the fealty from Affirm Loyalty. Just pretty important to get to that second chain link, our second dagger. So Glint does that pretty well, but mostly we're playing these all because they're blues and they block 3. All of our stuff is blues then block 3. We're just picking the best ones. Nip at the heels and Incision do identical things. They just give a dagger +1. Hopefully 99% of the time this is a blue or a block 3. But if you need it, you can use a fealty on it to get its effect. And it's actually still a 0 for 5 when you're doing that because it goes dagger for 2, dagger for 1, and sorry, actually dagger for 3, I should say, because it's getting +1. So dagger for 3, dagger for 1, dynamo. So you're still getting 5 value in the late game by itself. It's like you just play them because if you're going to fatigue, you'll end up with like 8 fealties, and then you can use these to still present 5 damage over and over at fatigue. Provoke is like a fun card that is the only way we can really disrupt in the entire deck. Just play it, maybe off a blue or like a Vigor. We also play Tunic for the long matchups because we play some 1 costs. And then that all you got. This card's just kind of broken in the current meta. There's so many, mostly because of Aurora. We can block their weapon and then draw a card. And then if they're not doing that, it's a yellow. So it's a resource card still. Obviously, I was talking about how blues are a bit better because of Grains. But yeah, I think this card is just so good that I'm okay missing out on the Grains value because when you get to block for 3 and draw a card, it feels pretty insane. Now, sideboard, what do we got here? Of course, this is not a full 60 because we're putting in different cards depending on the matchup. We have a very defensive package with 12 defense reactions here. This is for aggro decks, obviously. So we have these 12 cards that go in. And I think I put like 1 or 2 Hunt's End in addition. This card's pretty amazing, but you have to be at 3 fealties. So early game, it's blank, basically. It's just a 3 block that pitches for 1. So it's really, really bad early. Into slow decks, that's fine because you might even second cycle and then you draw it again and it's great. Or you'll just be at 3 fealty at a decent pace. But into aggro decks, it's still good once you are online. It's like your best card in your entire deck, I think. It is your best card in your entire deck once you're at 3 fealty because you dagger for 6 into 1 into Dynamo. So it's another 0 for 8. It's equally as good as Blade Flurry, but doesn't require an extra fealty. It just requires you to be at 3. So different scenarios. Blade Flurry is better before you're at 3 fealty. Hunt's End is better once you're at 3 fealty. So I'm just playing 2 into aggro, and then the rest, the 12 defensive cards, because we need 14 cards, right? So 12 defensive cards plus 2 Hunt's End is basically the anti-aggro package. You could play 3 Hunt's End if you really want the slot. I guess you could drop of the Dragon Blood from the deck, and then you just play all 3. They're not bad because they block 3, but there's a lot of hands where they're just blocking for 3, and you're like, oh, this kind of sucks. But yeah, bunch of defensive cards. We need to block. We have to slow the game down as much as we can into those aggro decks so we can hopefully get to 3 fealty. Aggro is definitely the weak suit for Fang because your deck's not good at all. It's like actively a pretty horrible deck until you get free weapon. And because aggro games are so fast, you spend like 70% of the game. Like if the game's only 6 turns, you probably aren't online until turn 4. So you're spending like more than half the game as a bad deck. It's like when the game goes like 15 turns that you're broken because you spend usually you're online on like on your 4th turn or so, if all goes well. So yeah, that is kind of the package there. The rest of the deck is the more aggro version, so kind of switchboardy. We've got Fire and Brimstone. Most of these are because they cost 1. So we've got Fire and Brimstone, which we're going to play a lot of the time for 1. Lets you attack with both daggers again. So this is really, really good at going wide. Some people play this always. You could, but because it does block 3, but it's like not gonna do much into aggro a lot of time. You're just gonna block with it for 3 because it's kind of hard to get the full value against aggro. It's only really good on a 5-card hand because since you want to attack with both daggers an extra time, like ideally you have 2 more Draconic reacts on top of this, so you need at least 3 cards and a resource, for example. So it's okay. But it's really good into slow decks. And then we've got Endear Devotion. This is the 1-cost version of Affirm Loyalty. Lets you make the extra fealties. It costs 1 instead, which is why it's not in against aggro. Because we're not playing Tunic against aggro either. But off of Tunic, this is really good. It's maybe worth playing if you're playing more blues. Like if I was on like 18 blues, you could always play it. But after I'm at 3 fealty, I just never ever want to pitch. I never want to pitch again for the rest of the game once I'm at 3 fealty. So this is pretty bad that it costs 1, except if we play Tunic. And with Tunic, you can just Arsenal them until you hit the 3rd counter. The issue is if the game's only 6 turns, you only see Tunic resource twice, and it's not really worth playing it over something like Grains of Blood Spill. So this is just when you bring in Tunic to go with also Fire and Brimstone, and then 2 Jagged Edge, mostly for Enigma, just for Enigma basically, but you can play them into anything that's slow because it does block for 3 and it does still give +3. It says damage can't be, the weapon would deal can't be prevented. Obviously that's broken into into Enigma because it can just blow up Enigma's entire board. But maybe it's good into like Florian, for example, because they do some prevention. Sometimes like Jarl plays Oasis Respite or something. I don't know. I'll play it into any of the slow decks for the most part because you'll at least get to block for 3 or get +3. But these are like 6 1-costs that we bring in with Tunic basically every time for when the game's slower. And I think they're Definitely 3 Endear Devotion and Fire and Brimstone should always be in a Fang deck because they're just really, really good one costs. Jagged Edge, I think is as long as Enigma's around, you want like 1 or 2 of these. 3 is probably overkill. You're not gonna need to do the effect that many times. Like they don't set up a big board that you need it for more than once or twice a game. Blaze Headlong is also when we're trying to be more aggro. Yeah, you just start with like a Sigil of Solace or a Pledge Fealty or Oath of Loyalty, and then you Blaze Headlong. I guess you could technically even Blaze Headlong and then pitch for Drop of Dragon Blood to give it a go again. So it can do some nice stuff. I think because it's a 2 block, I don't want to play it into aggro, but it's a nice 0 for 4 into slower decks. The last card is this Scar for a Scar. I don't know if this is the best pick. It's kind of just trying it out. I just need extra aggro pieces into the slower decks like Enigma. So we're playing Scar for a Scar. Probably could be something else. That card, maybe your 80th slot is whatever you want. You have to play these 3 equipment pieces. You need the Arcane Barrier for Aurora and for any Arcane deck. Kabuto is really amazing if they care about weapons against Enigma. It can like shut off their whole turn. Other warriors, it's really good. Just a pretty relevant headpiece for the matchups you need it. And then Tunic is really good for the long games with your 1 cost to be able to still play them once you're pitchless, because otherwise you have to pitch for them, which makes them really, really inefficient. I think I have the matchups mostly on here. I put also kind of the default setup for Arachne because it is basically like what I would consider kind of the default, which is more like the anti-aggro setup. You can see what's out against in the default. You just have these cards out. But this is kind of the default-ish. And then when we go more aggressive, like against Enigma, we switch to Tunic. I'm also running the Kabuto. So you have the Endear Devotions, the Fire and Brimstone. We have all these D-Reacts out. I would take all 3 sinks out, but I don't have enough. You would be at 59 cards then, so I'm having to play just 1 sync. That's fine. Like they attack sometimes, and sync lets you filter a little bit. Sigil's actively better because you can use it with a fealty to give your daggers go again. So like Sigil's always pretty good. What cards aren't in the deck? The main card that I'm surprised I don't have it in right now is Red Scar Tissue. This card maybe even just should be in, but the fact that it's not a Draconic reaction is what's really holding it back, and that it doesn't block 3. Compared to something like Blade Flurry also isn't Draconic, but it gives +4, and it blocks 3, which makes it just way more value. Of course, marking is important, but I don't know if it's worth it for this effect. If this blocked 3, oh, it would be in the deck for sure. And it maybe should even be in the deck already. You could also play the yellows because they're a resource card, but once again, I really want my resource cards to block for 3 because I'm almost always blocking for 3 with them once I'm pitchless. So that's kind of the ideal scenario for it to block 3. But maybe this red should be in it. It's probably the strongest card that's not in the deck. That and Savor Bloodshed. This card was in for a really long time, but they're just not marked as often as you'd think. Like half the time when they're marked, you just hit them right away and get the fealty with the second dagger. You can try to play wonky with this so that you mark them with the second dagger and then arsenal this. But like 90% of the time, it's just a +4, which is fine. It's not bad to give +4, but I don't think it's quite good enough. We really would rather it be a reaction or a defensive piece. Like +4 on offense is not good for us unless it's refreshing Dynamo. Rabble, it's like another attack reaction. If Scar or Rabble was Draconic, they would like always be in, but they're not. Hunt the Hunter I think is quite good. I see a lot of people play this, but it marks at the end of their turn, so it has like a little bit of counter synergy with Smoke Out. Also, if they're already marked and you attack with this, then it doesn't do anything, which is kind of awkward. I almost would have liked it more if it was a mark on hit. And it costs 1 is obviously like the main reason I'm not playing it. If it costs 0, I would like slam it in the deck. Hunt to the Ends of the Wraith. Hunt to the Ends of Wraith. It's like great if you only played Arachnes, but otherwise it's kind of similar to some like Savor Bloodshed, right? Where it's really great if they're marked because it basically is another Oath of Loyalty. I would definitely play it if it 3 blocked. The issue with like a lot of these cards is that they don't 3 block. Or that they're a little too awkward. And Imperial Seal of Command, this might be better than the one Scar for Scar. I think I had it in that spot for a while. It's kind of fun. You play it at the end after your second dagger, so you just have to give the second dagger go again with another Draconic card. You play this against really slow decks, and then when you have a big hand and you want to pop off, or like after the Enigma sets up her board and she's ready to defend it, you just destroy this with Go Again, and they can't play defense reactions. Like the whole turn, they can't play any defense reactions. Also, if you hit them, you destroy their arsenal. But like the main benefit is that they just can't play D-reacts the whole turn. So if you're really trying to push damage, and they get stuck with like 2 sync blows, they just have to take it. So I like that. Also because we do have Go Again on the second dagger a lot of the time. It's not even that awkward to play. So maybe you can play this over the Scar. I think that's what I had in before. Loyalty Beyond the Grave, I think, is pretty horrible into aggro because usually the game's too quick for you to find 2 of them. And into slower decks, like, I don't think it's super necessary. I don't really want D-reacts into slower decks. Twist and Turn, it's not bad, but same issue as Save or Bloodshed, kind of. It's just not an attack react. And then Relentless Pursuit, I played it for a while, but because it doesn't give +1 or Go Again, it's not a react like all our other blues. If it's like, it's much worse once you're at 3 fealty, basically, because it's doing nothing. At least these can use a fealty to give Go Again on your weapon. Yeah, that is the Fang deck. It's really strong once you're online. Like, definitely an A tier deck once you're online, but you start out as a C tier deck, right? So you start out as a pretty bad, like maybe D tier deck, basically, before you're at 3 fealty. And then once you're at 3 fealty, you're like A plus S tier level of power. So you just have to turbo to it. That's why a lot of decks do play the Endear Devotion in the main board, but I just hate how awkward it is once you're online. You don't want to be pitching for it. It's only a 2 block. I wish it was a 3 block. I wish all of these Draconic cards were a 3 block. But that's the deck. It has matchups in it too. I think they're mostly up to date. If you have any questions, let me know. I hope they gave a pretty comprehensive breakdown of the deck and what cards I'm playing and what I'm not. I do think all of these cards like have a reason to be in the deck, so you could mess around with them if you want to try a lot of these out. Especially like Scar Tissue was in the deck for a long time, and Savor Bloodshed. These were both like 3 ofs at one point, Scar Tissue and Savor Bloodshed. So there's cards that have come in and out. But right now the deck's pretty tuned for the Aurora matchup, since I think that's really common. That's why we're playing so many 0 for 4D reacts and the 3 sigil, just to try to really survive until we can get online. I do think if you can get online when you're at like 10 to 15 life, then you probably win a lot of the time against Aurora, because you can like almost block every point of damage they do and then swing 8 value with your weapon off of like Blade Flurry or Hunt's End or something. So it's not like an amazing matchup, but I think you can get there if you can stabilize a 3 fealty at like a decent amount of life. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments, remember to leave them below, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'll see you next time.